And let me get that out of the way. So technically, I got to go in and turn on no music, no intro. I posted technical difficulties, and now I'm going to make it go live. And let's see if anybody's there waiting.
Read.
Probably. And, maybe Max. Okay. All right. So technically, we are live. And so what we had some technical issues. And what was, do you have any idea what the issue was with the camera?
Yeah. So, well, no, I don't know what the issue is. My camera, my high quality Rockstar Logitech HD 1080p. It's a $99 camera, and I've had it for a long time. I used it just an hour ago, and it was fine. And I tried to log into Jeff's thing here, and it just would not cooperate. So ended up just the old fix that fixes most everything, as any support person will know, rebooted. So finally, after trying many other things, I unplugged the camera. It's a USB connected camera, plug it back in, and it came back alive. So the lesson for today is reboot it or unplug it and plug it back in. That's the fix. Many times does that fix many problems in the computer world, as we all know.
Right. Well, we didn't do any kind of fancy music or anything. We just boom went right on. There actually are a couple of people watching. So I wanted to talk to you about a couple of things, and because everybody's live streaming, and this might lead to some Pro Tools questions. But have you done any more work with what's the switchers? What's the studio platform you're using?
Well, I use Zoom.
No, webcast. What was the
Wirecast.
Wirecast?
Yeah.
Have you done anything more with that?
I have not really been doing much with that. I messed with it a little bit. Something I did do the other day, I had another client ask me about trying to broadcast to Instagram Live, which was an interesting question. I found out after trying to do it. I figured Wirecast would do it because Wirecast allows you to broadcast to all these different platforms, Facebook, YouTube, all these things. Well, Instagram is very specific to devices, so iOS and Android devices, phones and tablets. So if you want to use your computer and some higher quality mics and all that stuff, it's a little bit more challenging. But Wirecast, no, I've not really dealt much more with it than where we were before, because I've been just using Zoom, which apparently is going through major changes now. They've been apparently Zoom is a severe security risk in the computing world, in the IT and computing worlds, and they've been called out. And apparently, I heard they just came out with, very quickly came out with a new version of Zoom. So you have to update, and if you don't update, you'll have problems logging in. That's what I was thinking my issue was this evening. But
Yeah. So, have you been running your Pro Tools on any kind of live when you do your Zoom classes? Are you able to run your Pro Tools sessions now?
not directly. And I'm still in the process of figuring that out. So there is a Zoom audio driver, an elusive Zoom audio driver that I have found exists on my laptop. Our mutual friend Brian Carter was telling me, he uses it on his system, and I am unable to get that driver to install on my MacBook. I mean, on my Mac Pro. It's the older cheese grater Mac Pro.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it might be an issue with that old hardware. I think maybe the old Mac Pro is not capable of supporting this Zoom audio driver, and so
Do you think you could launch some tracks and play it through this application?
Well, so what I'm looking for in Zoom is, if you can see my screen right now, in the Pro Tools
Okay.
playback engine,
Mhm.
um, the Zoom audio driver, if it's available, would appear in here as a audio device, effectively, even though it's a software, a virtual audio device. And if it were there, I could select it, and then it would pipe my Pro Tools audio out through the Zoom connection that I've got to everybody. So the Switcher Studio connection that I have with you is browser based. So there's really nothing going on in my system at that level. So
Mm.
and I don't see it here, and I would be surprised if there was a Switcher Studio component that appeared here in my Pro Tools playback engine list, and it does not. So, unless I were able to try to add it to the audio MIDI setup, which I suspect it won't work there either. But hey, let's try it. Why not? Right? Wild,
Sure.
wild west. Okay.
So I put my phone number up because since we're here and we're talking Pro Tools, and these days, and why I mentioned American Idol, because I watched it the other night, and everybody is performing remotely, and they obviously had to have the band record everything ahead of time, have playback come from somewhere, and then the singer would sing it from their home and sing along with the playback. And then they would show cameras on the guys. So they obviously filmed the guys as they were recording.
Right.
So what I'm wondering is if what they might be using to play multi tracks back, or whether they've mixed it down, or maybe as people do more and more over the internet recording and stuff, maybe something will come up that they'll want to know, can we play multi tracks? You know what I mean? What I'm getting at?
Playing multi tracks in a across the internet thing.
Yeah. So, like right now, you wanted to pull up 5 tracks and play them.
Well, I can do that easily. It's going to
Oh,
be a mono or stereo output from my Pro Tools
I
system.
got you.
So, in terms of multi-tracking, well, let me say this. So, in real time, once again, that's the challenge. I don't, and I have to, well, there's a couple different things. We've talked about this many times. There's
Mm-hmm.
not a whole lot of, well, there's several different services or sites or whatever you want to call them that claim to do that. I've yet to see any of them that actually work, and I think that's what we found from other guests too, is that it's not quite there yet. Um, in terms of multi-tracking, Pro Tools does allow you to collaborate and have multiple people contribute to a session, but it's not a real-time thing. So I
Mm-hmm.
could create it's, instead of a session, it's called a project. So if I create a new session, I can do that. And basically it pushes it into the cloud, right? It stores all of the session and the audio files and all that in the cloud. And then I invite whoever I want to, in terms of other Pro Tools users, to access that session or that project that's in the cloud, download it in part or in whole, and then contribute to it. They could edit it, they could mix, they could record into it, whatever they wanted to do, and then they would push their contribution to that session, that project, back up to the cloud, and I would see it happen on my side. We could have the session open at the same time. And as soon as they made a change on their end, it would notify me here on my end that the change had been made, and I could, hit a button and it would, update my session. But it's not real time.
Okay, so let's say I have a track, and I actually might have a project where a a guy in Chicago wants me to put together a track for a corporate client, and I need to add some vocals to it. So if I put something here and we're collaborating, and a singer has Pro Tools, I can load it to the cloud, they can hear it, record it, and then I will see it a few minutes later in the cloud, or hear it, be able to download it and listen to it.
Right. Yeah.
So it is that faster than just emailing the files?
Yeah, it can be. So, you know, people have been sharing sessions over the internet with Dropbox and
Mm-hmm.
email and all these things for years, and those are still viable. What this cloud collaboration thing does is it streamlines that process so that you don't have to manually merge these session elements and import files and then line them up and whatever. It handles all that for you, and it's very quick. So the session that you create, you're going to upload it. Your upload speed is based on your internet speed, and then how much audio you're actually sending up, as a like MIDI information and edit information and plugins and all that stuff goes up very quickly. Audio
Mm-hmm.
files are a little bit larger, they're going to take a minute longer, but once the bulk of the session is up there and people are contributing to it, it's incremental. So number one, you can see it documents what changes have been made by who and when, and it does some sort of versioning thing as well, so that it manages all of these contributions to the project. So it's pretty slick in that way. It works pretty well. My example that I use all the time is Big Lake guy, Jamie Brewer. He and I used it. This is probably 3-4 years ago now. It was relatively new at that point, and he was a new Pro Tools user at the time, so we were kind of doing Pro Tools tutorials back and forth. And I was in Atlanta for a bit because I had a job out there. And then when I left, I said, "Well, let's keep this going over the Pro Tools cloud collaboration thing." And it worked quite well. I was impressed, and that was a good test because at the time Jamie was relatively new to Pro Tools. He wasn't a power user, but he was able to navigate it in no time. It wasn't like this big huge learning curve of making this work. So over a period of like 6 weeks or so, we started a session there, we shared it, and then when he had time, he would log in and he would add something or he would rearrange something, and then he'd go, okay, post it, and he'd let me know and go, hey, I'd bring it up and I'd do something to it. And it just kind of went back and forth. And either of us could log into it at any point, make a small change or a large change, add new audio, rearrange the song, whatever. And it just evolved, and it actually worked quite smoothly. I was kind of impressed. Up to that point, I had used it in very small examples, and it's fine. But yeah, so it's viable. Again, not real time, but it is really good for collaboration. The other thing too is that if you're not a Pro Tools owner already, you can get Pro Tools First, which is the free version of Pro Tools from Avid. It's a limited version of Pro Tools, but it allows you to do that cloud collaboration thing as well. There's a track count limit. But for many people, especially doing vocals and stuff, I could post a session and, maybe do a stereo mix down or create some stems within that session. So I'm not sending a big, huge session with a high track count. I could send, a condensed version of that, post it to a vocalist. As long as they have an audio interface of some sort and a decent mic, they can get Pro Tools First software for free. And,
And there's a question here. Have you heard any status on a COVID related extension of Pro Tools trial period?
No, they sent out an email, and I'm always suspicious. I have a love-hate relationship with Avid, mostly hate, a little bit of love. The product I love, the customers, the people that use Pro Tools I love. Avid as a company is just the biggest pain in the ass sometimes. So they sent out this big email, hey, COVID-19, we're here for you and we're going to help. So, and I was like, all right, cool. That sounds good. What does that mean? And they seemed to say that they were going to be flexible with 30-day licenses. So I reached out to one of my former colleagues at Avid and I said, "Hey, what's up with this? 30-day." And I said, "That's cool. That's awesome. I'm glad they're doing it." So, and he said, I said, "Well, after 30 days, what's up?" And he said, "Well, we can probably extend it." So this is not a policy as a whole, but if you need a extension on your 30-day license, let me know. Put my email up if you want. You can, um, and we can reach out to Avid, and I think we can get an additional 30-day license, and quite possibly, don't hold me to this, maybe a 90-day license. I'm not sure, but a 30-day license we should be able to get to extend a trial version of Pro Tools that you might be running. So they're claiming they're going to do that. I have not put them to the test on that yet. So
okay, so this is one thing that I think I want to point out in case anybody's watching and isn't a Pro Tools user and it looks scary to them. Like this lady in Canada that I've talked to a couple of times, Dana Keith. She's a singer and doesn't know anything about recording and something this deep. And there are a lot of singers that use something like GarageBand, or they want something that's real easy that they can just press and play and do a little vocal recording and stuff. Pro Tools can, for someone like that who hasn't been in a studio before, can seem overwhelming at first. But in all honesty, if you can use GarageBand, you really can use Pro Tools. It really is pretty easy to, once you get it up and you see the window we're seeing right now,
yeah,
that actually is pretty easy to put a track in. And it's
it
really
is.
easy to draw to drag a song off of iTunes and just put it in there.
No, you bring up a good point, and I hear that quite often. So Pro Tools can be deep. I think we talked about this before. The analogy I use, if you're a guitar player, if you know three chords, you can play a shitload of songs and you can play them very well. Pro Tools is similar to that, in my opinion. Is there's a small set of features or functions that you need to do or to have to be able to record audio, edit it in a basic way, and then get it out and maybe do some processing. And when I say processing, I mean just changing volume levels and maybe some EQ. But you don't have to be a power user to get good results out of it. GarageBand, all of the other apps, great. And what I'm saying here is I'm not bagging or saying anything bad about the other apps. They're all great, and whatever you can get your hands on, bottom line, is really what you should get into. With that said, one of the benefits of Pro Tools is that if you plan on working with anybody else in the audio industry, odds are very, very good that they're going to be using Pro Tools, and anything that you do on your home Pro Tools system is going to immediately translate to any other Pro Tools system, big or large. Number one. Number two, there's a massive amount of Pro Tools users out there that you can, pick their brain, or YouTube or whatever. There's a lot of resources, I should say, and at all levels, right? So if you're a beginner, there's a lot of resources out there. If you're advanced, so whatever level you want to get to. And I think some of the other applications kind of cap out, right? So GarageBand, great app. You can do a lot of great things in there. There's not a lot of bands recording their full, bands in GarageBand. And of course, since I've said that, someone's going to, prove me wrong.
It would be interesting to see somebody send in something. But what's the other main competitor is Logic.
Logic.
And I know a lot of people might use Logic for a home studio, but I don't know of many people that use Logic to record a lot of instruments personally.
Well, Logic is coming. So this sometimes helps too, people. So Pro Tools is coming from an audio engineer, audio mixer standpoint. where Logic is coming from. Oh, I'm getting Facebooked. Sounds painful. Um,
Well, it can be sometimes.
yeah, Logic is coming from a composer standpoint, right? So if you're composing music, and when I say composing, songwriter, composer is a little, I think of the keyboard player, and there's, multiple parts, and keys and strings and all that stuff. It's really focused at that sort of a workflow from the composer's standpoint. And if that's the kind of work you're doing, then Logic is definitely going to make sense for you. Very powerful, quite capable. And again, not knocking Logic whatsoever. And you can't beat the price. It's $200 for the full on version of Logic.
Mm.
Pro Tools is coming from the other side of that, where it's the audio engineer, audio mixer standpoint. And although both apps overlap quite significantly in terms of their functions and their features, the way they approach them are coming from different angles, and sometimes that can make all the difference. So Logic, great app. I think Cubase may be more aimed at a composer, from a composer standpoint as well. I'm not sure.
Where I'm not really sure how many people are using Cubase. I don't think Cubase is something that big in LA. Do a lot of people use Cubase in LA?
Not. I don't know for sure. There's probably some. I think outside of LA, there definitely is and in, like Europe, I think Steinberg, Cubase, and Nuendo are quite popular. I'm sure there's, a good number of Cubase people here. I'm not sure. I don't come across them. I'm a hardcore Pro Tools guy, and I know like the higher end composers for TV and film will often use Logic as their composing tool combined with Pro Tools, where they actually will record their compositions out of Logic, print them into Pro Tools, and use Pro Tools to not only mix those projects, but also deliver those projects to, the final mix stage where the TV show and or the film is mixed, because that is definitely Pro Tools. I can't think of any other uh,
And
film stages that are using anything but Pro Tools.
okay, I have a couple of things that I want to get to. So Reed did say that he sent a rough mix to a guitar player, and then the guitar player recorded a rhythm guitar part in GarageBand and sent it back, and then he mixed it, and that was cool for him. He also said that he got up and running based on the first thing we did on in the green room here last Tuesday, and you helped him kind of get that whole thing we did helped him get up and running. But
Cool.
so yeah, so that's good. So somebody's getting something out of this. Now, here's what I wanted to ask. Once you've gotten a session, let's say you've got 3 tracks there,
Okay.
and this is where I get stumbled on, and you load in 3 different tracks, and
Okay.
I want to mix it, and I want to put one plug in, and I always have issues on this. So after we've got our 3 tracks, then I want to mix it, and I want to use one reverb plug-in across all 3. Reverb for all 3 of those tracks.
Yeah. Let me open up another session. I got a perfect example for that. That's a common topic.
Yeah, I always get confused.
Yeah. So there's a couple ways to do that. But the main way, or a common way, is called a send return routing configuration. Sounds terrible and painful, but it's really the same way you would do, you know, do it on a live, on a mixer. If you actually had a physical mixer, you're using auxes to send to a reverb, and then you're bringing the output of that reverb back into the mix. So I got some drum tracks here. You'll dig these, Jeff. So
Okay.
it's your friend Dave Weckl, and we're going
I
to,
would love to be able to call him and talk to him
okay.
about this. He'd probably want to charge me. But I'm
Can you hear
not
that?
Yeah, not real well though. You haven't been able to get that to come through the stream yet, huh?
No, let me try this. I'm going to switch it over to my HDX so I can just bring up the volume without bringing up your volume too. So the idea of reverb is you're emulating a room or a space. When you pull up a reverb plugin, basically all the presets and everything that you see are rooms, a church or a cathedral or a hall or a small room or a large room. You're emulating an environment, and a reverb, you can make it a small room, you can make it a large room, you can make it a huge room, whatever you want to do. Typically, if for example, if you had 3 or 4 vocalists, you would want to put them in the same room. Of course, you don't have to. You can put them each in their own room. Maybe you want to put the lead vocalist in one room and the 3 backup vocalists in their room. I don't know. There's a ways to do that, but so you can accomplish that in Pro Tools. If I were to put a reverb plugin on each of the vocal tracks, they would each live in their own room effectively. And let's see if I can open this up. Come on. And that would be fine. And you could do that. I would be making my computer work a lot harder. Reverbs are kind of taxing to the system, right? They're more intensive in terms of the horsepower that they use. So let's see if I can get this to work so you can hear it. Can you hear that?
Yeah, that's better. Yeah.
Okay, so these drums, we've got kick, we've got snare, and 2 overheads, and I've got a master fader that I'm going to hide here. And I'm going to look at it from the mix window because that's really what we're doing, right? So I'm going to add a stereo aux track. Go to the track menu, new stereo aux track. And I'm going to name it. Oh, I did audio track. I just blew it. Let me try that again.
So it's going to be a stereo aux track.
Yes. Let me try it again. Stereo aux input. I can name it here. I'll call it reverb. There it is. I'm going to put a reverb plugin on the top. And I'm just going to use the stock deverb. It's a great utility reverb. It's highly underrated, but it's actually used way more than most people would realize. So as we talked about a second ago, you've got hall and church and plate and room 1 and room 2, and then size, small, medium, large. These are all the parameters of how you can dial up how big of a space do you want to create. And of course, there's a whole bunch of presets in here as well. Boomy, can, large church, dark, large hall. So they're all named around rooms, right? Ambiances. So I'm just going to go room. I'm going to do a small room, right? And you'll notice that the delay time, the decay, how long that reverb tails out basically changes on how large or small. So a small one's got a shorter decay of 500 milliseconds. Medium is 750-ish. Large is 1 second. Of course, you can change that manually. And this is a very basic reverb, so it's kind of good to use. So I've put the deverb plugin as one of the inserts on my reverb channel. Currently, the input of this stereo aux is set to nothing. I'm going to choose a bus, which is an internal hose for audio inside Pro Tools. I just choose bus 3132 because it was available. It could be any bus you want. And now I need to create a send on these audio tracks. So I have my sends view enabled. I'm going to do snare because that's probably going to be more recognizable right out of the gate. So I'm going to go down and select that same bus. Now, this is the bus that I've created. It gives me this floating window, which I'm going to close. I'm going to go to the expanded sends view, which I think it was send A that I created that on. Yeah, there it is. So this is the send. It's basically a water faucet. It's a faucet for audio that allows me to send none or a little or a lot of audio through that bus, in this case 31 and 32 that I've selected, to wherever it's connected to, in this case, the reverb channel, right? So I'm going to solo up the drum track. I'm going to solo safe the aux track so that it doesn't mute as a result of my solo. And I'm just going to play that. Come on. There's my snare. So as I bring the gain of this send up, it's sending audio, snare audio, over to this aux track through this reverb, and then it's coming back into my session here. Whoops, got my all group enabled. So from here, I have the ability to select how much snare I want going to the reverb, and then I have the ability to control the overall volume of the reverb coming back. So in this case, if I want to add the overheads or the kick drum, let's put the kick drum in there as well. So I'm going to create the same send. Let's go to bus 3132. There it is. It defaults off. So as I'm going to put the kick in there, there it is. Can you hear that?
Yeah. Yeah. So I always get stuck on creating the aux channel. That's what I think I never did. I think that's why I always got confused.
Yeah. And no, that's a common question. If you don't do it often, if you don't use it, you'll lose it. So in this case, we're sending the kick and the snare tracks to the same reverb. We're putting them in the same room, which is legit, right? It's a drum kit.
So does this take up more with CPU or space or less space? If I'm using a different reverb plugin on each channel, will that take up more
resources? Yes.
Resources than if I just use one reverb and put it across all 5 instruments?
Yeah. So this method uses less system resources because I'm using one reverb, and in this case I'm only sending 2 tracks to it, but I could duplicate this. So if I'm on a Mac, so if I click and drag, hold down the option key and click and drag this over to the the overhead tracks, now I've
the option key.
So option, click and drag basically will duplicate that send and the levels, right? So now I have my overhead. I'm going to pan the overhead left to the left, the overhead right to the right. Now I've got 4 audio tracks all in one reverb. So let me pull those up. No reverb. And in this case, I've got 4 different tracks, 1 reverb. If I were to put a single reverb on each one of those 4 tracks, then I would be using a lot more system resources. I mean, that's not a huge number, but as your session gets larger, it's quite common for people to layer and stack vocals. They might have 10, 12, 20 tracks or more of vocals. If you were to put a reverb on every one of those vocal tracks, your system would start to feel the weight of those plugins. And so in that case, I would strongly recommend that you do this. That way you can do one reverb, or maybe you want to split it up and you want to have, some vocals on one reverb and some vocals on another reverb. You can switch it up that way.
Yeah. Well, what happens to me, because I don't do this, and you can do the same thing with compression, right?
Well, you can. So definitely. So, absolutely.
Well, what happens to me, because I don't have that big of a computer and I don't have that much space. I run into, when I start putting too many plugins, the tracks freeze up.
Yeah. So absolutely you can do that. Typically with compression though, you would probably have a compressor on each track. So the challenge with compression is that each track, compression is based on a threshold. It's a volume level. So if all the volume of all the tracks are relatively in the same ballpark, then a compressor on an aux fader could work. But typically you're going to use a compressor on each individual track, and then their output will be summed through an aux.
You have a dancer. Do you have a dancer there? Is there like a dancing girl in the background?
Yeah, it's my uh-oh.
Hey, Ava.
Hi. I was going to tell you a joke.
Uh-oh. Tell me a joke.
I just heard it. Or Little Summer told it to me. What kind of cheese isn't your cheese?
What kind of cheese isn't your cheese?
Yeah. Nacho cheese.
Nacho cheese. And I take a beating from her and my son for bad dad jokes. But to me,
Oh,
that's pretty bad
well,
right there.
I've got bad dad jokes too. So this is what I usually like to try to do once my session is done, and I want to put some a master compression over all of them.
Right. Yeah.
So how would I do that? Would I need to create a master send and then compress that?
Yeah. So good question. Right. So I'm going to bring up this view here.
This is kind of geeky, nerdy stuff. So only sound, or not everybody.
Well, yeah, it is and it isn't. So vocalists, singer-songwriters that are recording their own songs, this is a very common thing. And again, if your song has 2 tracks, vocal and a guitar, it's nice to add a little reverb to them. You could put the reverb plugin right on each track, or you can use this aux track configuration. So in this session, we have a master fader, which is right here.
Mm-hmm.
And if I unsolo all these, so that's the overall volume for everything, right? So it would be very common to have probably a limiter. I might put something, and this is a stock plugin for Pro Tools Maxim. I might put it down.
And I'm not really sure on Maxim. I know it sounds really good, but I use it mostly for like there is a what's the setting, and it's not for, it's mastering. It's a mastering setting.
Brick wall limiting for Maxim you're talking about?
I think it's Maxim that has, for like when you want to master something.
What's that?
When you want to master, like you make a master of all the tracks,
right,
and just mix it down to one, and you want to put some overall compression. Isn't there a mastering setting on that?
Well, there is. There's some presets, and there's one I didn't even know it was there. It's called CD Mastering 16-bit. So,
yeah.
What Maxim will do, and a common question I get is, the songs that I create in Pro Tools, they're not as loud as a commercially purchased CD, and a lot of that is the overall level. How do you increase the overall volume of your finished song without clipping it, but so that it's bold and big? And Maxim is a limiter. There's a bunch of them out there. Waves makes a couple, L2, L3. McDSP plugins make a ML4000, a series of different versions of the ML4000, which are all great at that. So what they do is basically they put a ceiling, a brick wall ceiling, at the the highest level, volume level, so that no audio will go beyond that. It prevents peaking, it prevents clipping, so that when you turn the gain up, any peaks or volume that reaches that ceiling, they will be hopefully gracefully controlled. Right, that's where this ceiling is, this ceiling parameter. So I usually, if I'm doing a music track and I want to output it, I'll usually take that ceiling down. Well, let's see what they had it for the preset. They had it at minus 0.1 dB. So that's as loud as you could possibly make it. And then the threshold, basically, as you bring the threshold down, it brings the overall volume up. And I'll show you. So I'm going to put the master fader at 0. And there's 2 things. I mean, I don't know if you're going to be able to hear it so much because of this listening situation is a little bit less than ideal, but you can see the metering, right? So if you look at the meter on this master fader,
mm-hmm.
It's pretty good already.
So let me.
So here's without it.
Yeah.
Here's with it. And I'm kind of exaggerating it a bit, but
Well, let me throw out this, and this is what a lot of people who say they know how to use Pro Tools, and they give me tracks to play for playback, for tracks to sing along with, and I'll be playing them, and they'll say, "Well, I mix it in Pro Tools; they're good." When I get them, they're all distorted. You can tell that they've put too much of something. Would that be a compression issue? Because you said when you mix, a lot of times the tracks are softer, which they are, and what people do to get them louder sometimes ends up not working, and they end up with a distorted track.
Yeah, so definitely compression and limiting could be a cause of that. The other, and I guess the overall term for that is gain staging, proper gain
Mm-hmm.
staging. There is so many places within the signal chain from your microphone and the preamp on your microphone all the way through the Pro Tools mixer and out the master fader. There are so many places where you have the ability to change the gain, and you need to maintain a proper, gain staging or etiquette, whatever you want to call it,
Mm-hmm.
so that you want to increase it, but you don't want to overdo it, and that's where meters come in. So EQ is a form of gain, right? So if you boost a certain frequency, you've increased the gain or the volume of that frequency. Now it's going to run through a compressor, and a lot of times compressors are used to control those peaks, but then again turn up the overall volume of that signal, right? You want to do that. So that's another level. And then it comes through the track. You've got a volume fader on the track. It's going through an aux track. Maybe you've done some submixing. That's another volume, level control section. And then it hits your master fader. So it's quite easy to, have something that's not, or have something that's too hot, too much. So compressors would do it, gain do it. As you have a larger number of tracks in your session, you have more audio signals that are being combined. And by definition, you are increasing the volume, right? If everything's being combined together, the overall volume is increasing. If you take two signals, just two, and you combine them in their phase coherent, you're going to get a slight bump in gain. And as you multiply that across a larger number of tracks, you can create a signal that is quite hot. And internally inside Pro Tools, it can handle that. But at some point, it's like the Who Framed Roger Rabbit, cartoon Toontown. You're in the digital audio realm. You can do anything you want in there, right? You can throw your audio off a cliff. You can beat it over the head with a hammer. At some point, it has to come out of Toontown into the real world, and it has to come out through this 24-bit window. And if you've taken all of these tracks and you've gained everything up with volume and compression and limiting and to get this fat sound, you may have created a signal that's too large to fit through that 24-bit window, and that will result in distortion, clipping, all of the above. So, all of those things, improper gain staging kind of sums it all up. But volume levels of audio you've recorded too hot, compressors, limiters, volume levels, combined number of channels coming out of master fader that are too hot, those would all do it. It's quite easy and common to do all of that, actually.
Mm.
That's a longer answer than you wanted. Sorry.
No, it actually is, because proper gain structure actually is a real critical thing in live sound too.
Period. Yeah. Audio. Period.
I mean, right now, if I've learned that Switcher Studio won't handle, I have to have the gains set really low.
Right.
And then turn the faders up to get volume. If the gain is just slightly above a certain threshold, it starts to distort.
Right.
And, and there are other applications and other times when I have to turn the gain up a lot more to
Right.
get it to sound right with the fader not as high.
Right.
So, That's what I noticed the biggest issue with a lot of people who have Pro Tools and use it to mix, and it's usually singers or maybe a guitar player. Most of the time, surprisingly, guitar players are pretty good at doing stuff, but it's usually singers or somebody that has Pro Tools and they say, "Yeah, I know how to use Pro Tools," and always their tracks are distorted. And all I can do is say, man, your tracks just don't work. Send them to me next time.
Well, yeah. So depending on where they're distorted, you may or may not be able to fix them, right? If it's just a bunch of compressors and limiters that are causing that distortion, then you can back those. If they give you the session, you can go back in and you know remedy that. But if it's just audio that's printed, then you're kind of stuck with it. Not a whole lot
Right.
you can do with that.
Right. Well, that's why a lot of times if I will do shows and people will say, okay, I'm going to bring tracks. I'm making some tracks for the show. I will ask them to send them to me instead of mixing themselves.
Right.
Because I, as the audio engineer, would rather have them sound good so they don't look at me and say, what's wrong with the tracks?
Right. It's your fault.
Yeah, it sounded good on my computer.
Yeah. Oh, that's another thing too. What you're listening to, you just bring up a good point, right? So if someone's mixing on, their computer speakers, it might sound good there, but they may not be hearing all of that super low frequencies that the computer laptop cannot replicate. And now you put it on a big system that has the ability to produce the low frequencies, and it's just blown out and distorted. Sound good on the laptop, or maybe your headphones don't. So yeah, that's another good point.
Yeah.
What you're listening to.
Yeah. So I'm just seeing if there's any other questions, but those were the two common things that I have the most issues with, because I don't use Pro Tools all the time, but I will probably have to use it this weekend or this week to mix some vocal tracks. And every time I go in to start to mix, everything you just told me will go out the window, about doing the reverb. And I'm sure that I would be on the phone going, okay, so how did you do that again?
Right. And return. Yeah. If you don't use it, you lose it.
Right.
But it comes back quickly though, usually, right? Once you spend a little bit of time in there and you go, oh, okay, yeah, it's coming back. No.
Yeah. So and it really is pretty easy out of the gate to make an easy track, or even just pull in a song. I use it to edit. Let's say I was doing sound for a grade school or elementary school for their talent show, and all of the kids would send songs that they wanted to perform to. And I would get them, and I can take Pro Tools and clip the ends and edit them so the songs can be 30 seconds or
right.
a minute.
Yeah, right.
And Pro Tools is beautiful for that and really easy and quick compared to other things like even Ableton. Ableton is, and that's another beast that I want to get better at, is Ableton.
I've not played. Yeah, it's coming from yet a different place other than we talked about an audio engineering perspective or a composer. It's more of a beat maker producer kind of standpoint.
Right.
Which is yet another approach. Here's another session. So you talked about just playing with sessions.
Mm-hmm.
I have some sessions if people want to play with them and just mix. There's a little song I recorded. No, it's not me.
Who is this? Is it just guys?
It's this guy, Jimi Hendrix is his name. You may have heard of him. So, but this is a multi-track.
So this is something that you could give to somebody if they reached out to you directly,
Yeah,
and they could
I have a
practice.
bunch of sessions like this that are fun to play around with, and what it kind of does is it takes you out of I'm trying to learn Pro Tools mindset into holy shit, this is a cool song. Let me listen to it. Let me solo up this guitar track that I've heard a gazillion times, but I'm hearing it soloed up now. Um, and you're thinking about the song and maybe adjusting levels and panning it a little bit, and you're thinking about the audio that you're dealing with, and less of a I'm trying to learn Pro Tools frame of mind as let me just listen to this and make this mix. Holy shit, this is a cool.
Sorry, John.
That's all right.
So go ahead. Where you were saying?
Oh, that was it. I said it.
Oh, okay. I was trying to respond to how do I get those songs? And someone, I just put your website up.
I mean, these are all over the internet. So
yeah, so somebody could contact you, or you could download them. You can find them on the web. Some of these different things. There was also a session. I think there was some Marvin Gaye sessions.
Oh yeah, some Marvin Gaye's. There's several sessions. Those are really cool because those are 16 track sessions. Like the Jimi Hendrix stuff. That's like 4 tracks. All the drums are mixed down to a stereo, to a single track basically. So there's only so much picking apart you can do. Even that's fun, but the Marvin Gaye sessions I've seen, they're 16 tracks, so you have more of a split out elements, right? You've got the just more things to play with and to solo up and to listen to the lead vocal. There was a couple that session that I listened to had 2 lead vocal tracks, so you could solo up, and basically it was like put you in the vocal booth with Marvin Gaye. You could it's just a very cool different perspective that of these songs that we've all heard 1,000 times. They're classic, outstanding songs, and to be able to hear them in that way is fun. And you can learn Pro Tools at the same time.
Right. Well, one of the things when I first got the SC48, I was able to pull some of those things up, and you showed me this, how to play them back and practice putting compression and everything, like a virtual sound check thing.
Right. Yeah. No, those are a great tool to do that with. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is not a Pro Tools thing, but this is the A Switcher Studio thing. And do you know anything about getting let me do this. Do you know anything about getting an audio signal into an iPad or an iPhone?
Actually, I was literally just looking at that. We were talking about it in terms of Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
There is a little mixer from Roland that I'm trying to order. Actually, I shouldn't tell you because if everybody orders it, I won't be able to get it.
Can you still get it? I've been trying to get a couple of things that everybody's sold out.
Yeah, no, they're hard to come by. So this is, I don't know if you can see my screen here. This is the Roland Go Mixer Pro. There's 2 of them. There's a Go Mixer and there's a Go Mixer Pro. The Go Mixer is $100. The Go Mixer Pro is $150. And it's got like 9 inputs on it, which I was amazed. It connects to an iPhone or any iOS device, so iPhone or tablet, and it also works on Androids as well.
So, but it's supposed to go into now. Here, I don't know if you can you?
Yeah.
Can you see this? I don't know if it's showing up on the internet. But I went out and bought this thing today, and it's a TRRS,
right?
Tip ring sleeve, and then this end, I'm not sure what it is. I believe it's audio only, but it doesn't work. It's supposed to engage when you put it in the headphone port of an iPad, it's supposed to engage the microphone, correct?
Well, yeah. So I have a couple of devices like that too. I have. It's funny that I have it all right here. Happen to have it here. There's. Well, so this is
Oh,
a.
here, wait a minute. Let me put this up there because you were showing that Roland thing. Okay, so go ahead.
So this is just. It's actually. I bought it online. I can't remember what it's called. It's two mics and a headphone jack, and they're little lav mics, and they're designed to be like little interview.
Is that the Rode?
I don't think this is Rode. I can't think. And you know what it might be is iBauer. I bought a couple of them and basically just little teeny lav mics that plug in. The problem, I think part of it is that, for the iPhone 10, there's not a headphone jack on the phone. So you're using the little adapter, the lightning to eighth inch, and that should have the tip ring sleeve thing that you're talking about. But I think that translation is part of the problem. But I'm
Well,
not sure.
so I went out and got this today, this thing.
Uh-huh.
Went out and got it, and then I plugged it in to my dongle into the headphones.
Right.
I got an 1/8 inch tip ring sleeve and took it out of my headphone jack. So in essence, I should be sending signal. And when I did this and hooked these two things together, it wouldn't take the audio signal, no matter how I hooked it up. Technically, if I take my audio signal the same as like this thing right here that you're seeing,
Yeah.
technically, I should be able to put this in there and do it like this, and it should be sending signal. If this, I'm just saying.
Yeah. No, I hear you.
And here's the thing is I watched YouTube video after YouTube video after YouTube video, and all everybody says, just get an iRig. But an iRig won't work for me because I want to do multi-channel.
Right. So I hear you. This little Roland thing has 9 different inputs on it, which is pretty amazing to me.
Does it come with something to plug into
Your iPhone? It comes with the cables. It comes with the lightning cable, or Android, whatever it uses, the micro USB or whatever. But so it's got a mic pre-input on it. It's got a mic plug with like a little 1/8 inch lav type mic connection. It's got phantom power. It's got like a DI for a guitar or a bass. It's got 2 line level inputs. So you can do a stereo like keyboard into it, or 2 separate line inputs, and volume for them all.
Okay, so I'm in a situation where I may be helping somebody do a church from home. They've got drums, which they aren't going to really mic, but they've got bass, they've got a Fender Rhodes, they've got an acoustic piano, and 3 singers.
This isn't going to do it for you.
Right. So what I need, but I think that would be really good. I'm wondering if I couldn't take audio out of an aux of a regular mixer and put into that.
Yeah. No, absolutely. If you sub-mixed it on a mixer, that's capable of handling the number of inputs that you're talking about, and do even a mono or stereo aux send to this device, I think you could do it through a phone. I've not tried this. I tried to get one of these today, and everybody's sold out. It's like early June is the earliest so far that I've found. So I'm trying to find one of these.
When you get it, can I borrow it?
I'll show it to you via camera. But yeah, I suppose.
Everything is sold out. I mean,
yeah,
because the minute this thing crashed and everybody started trying to use their phones, and that was the other thing that I was going to say to you, because of watching American Idol, they got one of those circular TV lighting things that everybody's using now, the studio lights that it's a circle,
right?
And they put their iPhones in the middle, and they were hooking plugging the iPhones in and using that as a source as audio and video. Their
Right.
iPhones from remote locations, but they weren't using Switcher Studio. They were using something way more high end.
Oh yeah, I suppose so.
Yeah, American Idol has a lot of money, so they had to be using something more sophisticated than Switcher Studio, I believe.
Well, I mean, Switcher Studio is basically just a super condensed version, software version of full blown video hardware. Like where I work during the day, KCRW radio, we actually have a full on video production facility as well, and all of this functionality on a much larger scale in terms of how many sources you can have. It's all hardware and all that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so you can spend massive amounts of money on it, but Switcher Pro is doing it, an awesome job in a affordable, much more affordable, accessible way. So
Right.
same concept, just scaled down and made accessible, which is a beautiful thing ultimately. So
Yeah, if I can just figure out how to make this thing work, all of this stuff.
yeah, I've had mixed results with that too. Even these little microphones that I purchased, because I took a radio class last semester,
Mm-hmm.
and we were talking about doing interviews, where you go out and you interview, you're the interviewer and you have someone who's an interviewee. And, I have a bunch of audio gear, but most people in the class did not. And I wanted to just see if there was some, cheap solutions. And these things are $30, $40, and they actually sound decent, but I wasn't able to totally get consistent results. Like this one I thought was awesome because it plugs into the same type of connection that you're talking about, the adapter to get it into an iPhone. It's got two mics and a headphone, and I was like, oh, that's amazing. That'll be great. And I couldn't get it to work consistently every time. And
Well, I think the issue is, uh, everybody wants to be able to go, um, to be able to make these really wonderful, great sounding recordings. And then they go out and they will buy this stuff and go, oh, it's only $30 and it'll sound okay. But if you really want to do high end quality audio, all of these little things they're going to be okay, but they're never going to be at the level you think they should be.
yeah, no, these are just little voice interview kind of things that I'm talking about. If you want to record instrumentation, you're going to need to invest more than that. With that said, though, there are a lot, the microphone market, there are a lot of really good mics that you don't have to spend $4,000, $3,000, $2,000, $8,000 on. You can, for a couple $100, you can get some really quite capable, great sounding mics, depending on
Right.
what it is that you're doing. So,
Right. Yeah, it's just like this mic that I'm using right here. Everybody goes, wow, what are you doing with that mic? It sounds really good. It must be. And of course it is a more expensive mic, but I could get the same sound out of an SM58.
yeah, no, I always tell people if you got to get an SM58 if you're going to be doing anything with audio. You got to have a 58. You're not a studio if you don't have a 58 and a 57.
Or a 57.
You got to have one of each.
Yeah.
Can't go wrong with those.
No.
$100 or less for those.
Right. Well, John, we've been at it for an hour and we actually talked about some good stuff.
Here's my 58 right here.
There you go.
I got several. Got to have one of these.
I think I got one laying around in this room too.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think yeah. Well, I was going to talk about interfaces again, but that's what your Go Mixer Pro is.
Well, for an iPhone or an iPad, yeah. Audio interfaces, if you just want to record yourself, vocals or your instrument or whatever, there's a whole bunch of them. I use
you wouldn't be able to use this Pro Go Mixer Pro. You wouldn't be able to use that as an interface into Pro Tools.
Well, you would have to. Pro Tools does not work on a tablet. There's not a tablet version of Pro Tools software, but I think this might be able to connect to a computer. There's a chance that it would work. I didn't really investigate it in that way. That's a good question. But there are a lot of other really good audio interfaces. Focusrite makes the Scarlett series, and they're cheap, $150, $200,
Right.
and
So
they sound great, and they're really good.
yeah, that's what I got.
I have a 4i4. I'll grab it.
I think I have the 6.
Yeah, there's a whole series of interfaces that they make. The main difference between them all is how many inputs and or outputs do you need simultaneously. So this has 4 in and 4 out. There's a smaller one that has 2 in and 2 out. There's even a smaller one than that, has 1 mic pre and a guitar, DI direct input on it. And those are even cheaper. Or of course, if you're recording more mics or sources at the same time, you can get bigger ones too. But yeah, they're all really cool boxes, and they're quite cost effective, and they work with anything: Pro Tools, GarageBand, Logic, all of the audio applications that you might be using.
Right. And I want to show you something quick before we hang up here. I have to use Ableton as an interface here because that's what I need to use. Let me see here. Is it going to work? Yeah. Okay. Okay. Listen. So not that I can play piano, but I'm using this to just show you what I'm doing here. So what I did is I ran this M Audio keyboard
Right.
into my computer, and then the computer sends it into the Scarlett, and then I use an external out. This is kind of weird, to go back into the computer or back into the mixer so I can get it to go through my speakers.
Mm.
It sounds like it shouldn't work, but it does.
What about latency? Any latency?
None. Nope.
All right. Cool.
Yeah. So I can use it to do little recordings.
Nice.
Yeah. Well, anyway, we probably should wrap it up, but this is good. This is I'm going to do regular Tech Tuesday, and I kind of would like to do something where you and I both can talk to people and interview somebody if you got time on Tuesday nights.
Sure.
Just because it's more interesting than just me talking, or, if we have somebody else to talk to, because I'd like to dabble into more of this live streaming stuff and be able to maybe play some tracks through. Like if there was a way you could get to send it through a mixer so we could hear it like it was direct.
It was meant to be. Yeah. I'm working on that. I need to do that. That might, my fear is that I may have to get a new computer to do that. My old Mac Pro Tower has been a workhorse for me, but that's a 2012, version of a Mac.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking that's why the Zoom functionality and the internal routing, but I don't know yet. So I'm on that path.
Okay.
So anyway, yeah, I'm working on that.
Yeah. All right. So I was just looking to see if there's any more questions. Reed has been here with us through the whole time.
Nice. Thanks for hanging out, Reed. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Reed. If it wasn't for Reed, we wouldn't have any questions other than me being the knucklehead.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to wrap up, but I'll wrap it up with some music, and I have your website up here, protoolsservices.com.
Cool. Yeah.
So, I know people have logged in. We've had some people kind of log in and stroll through. So I know that that it might be a case where somebody watches back and then has a question. And that's what I'm hoping, that eventually people will start going, hey, I got this question. Hey.
Right. Yeah. Well, hopefully we'll have an
All
answer, or we'll just,
right.
make something up.
Yeah, we'll record a song.
Yeah.
All right, man. Um, I'm going to go. Thank you, John. And
No
I'm
problem.
going to
Thank
close
you.
the show. I'm going to, take it out in my usual fashion. Here we
Thanks.
go.
See you next time.
All right.